Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we're going to take a look at the upcoming T-square between Venus, Saturn, and Uranus. I'm going to do a two-part series on this. Starting today, we're going to take a look at Venus's opposition with Saturn. So before I dive in, I'm going to put the real-time clock up, and let's take a look at what's going on. So you can see here that Venus is coming into a conjunction with Mars in the sign of Leo, which is a really nice transit. I happen to love Venus-Mars conjunctions. I think that they often bring really nice moments in relationships. They can be very creative. They tend to bring tensions together and somehow harmonize things that have been maybe stressful. We're going to be talking about that later. But in the meantime, Venus, just like Mars last week, has to now run the gauntlet here, go through the opposition to Saturn and the square to Uranus. So you can see that Venus is going to move through this in the next few days. Let's just walk it forward and show you how this is going to work. Venus will oppose Saturn between today and tomorrow, July 7th, the 6th into the 7th. And then by the 8th, and into the 9th, that's Friday, Venus will have moved through the square to Uranus. So between now and Friday, you're looking at, about, 4 days. You could even take it into Saturday of this powerful T-square once again. Now, after that's all said and done, next week, we're going to see by Monday, we're going to say Venus coming together with Mars right after the new moon. So the other big thing that's happening this week is on Friday. We also have a new moon in Cancer. So the T-square here is in some ways happening as the last result of the end result of the whole lunar cycle that we've just been through. And then the Venus-Mars conjunction that comes through next week sort of tones the cycle ahead, which to me is really great because that's kind of just gives you a picture of something that's completing itself. And, starting off with a really nice conjunction between Venus and Mars and a new moon cycle to me just looks pretty auspicious compared to the heaviness of the Saturn-Mars-Uranus T-square that we went through the past week or so. Anyway, so let's talk today about Venus and Saturn since that comes first in the order of things. And, there's a number of different there's a number of different things that we can look at with this transit. As always, the archetypal combinations are multivalent for one planet. And then when you put them together when you put the one planet's multivalence together with another, you get an intersecting field. It becomes like a mandala with two different patterns coalescing together at the same time. So Venus and Saturn in opposition with one another are going to bring up more of the inherent tensions between the two archetypes, and they're going to compete as if it's one or the other. It's this or it's that. If you can't do this and you can't be that, those kinds of either, and the quality of rejection can be a huge part of any kind of opposition. Oppositions are of the nature of Saturn, and Saturn is a planet that says no to things, negates things. And what that means is that it's putting it outside or it's putting it as an other. For example, when you see people who are born with Saturn in the first house, it could mean that they have a Saturnine personality. But what does a Saturnine personality mean? It means that they have strong ways of defining themselves in contrast to what they are not. And similarly, people with Saturn in the first house could be defined by society in some ways. They could be an outcast or kind of a black sheep or someone who doesn't necessarily fit in. I'm trying to remember some of my examples from my classes or lectures that I've given. I believe it was Nina Simone, or was it Nina Simone? I think it was Nina Simone who was born with Saturn in the first house. And it was like her family had sort of rejected her because they thought that jazz was like the devil's music. Of course, she experienced prejudice in her industry, in the music industry. And so sometimes Saturn will be something that marks you as other, or it could be a sign of a personality who defines themselves not so much by what they are, but particularly in terms of what they aren't. So, if you think about, for example, alternative music in the 90s when Saturn moved into Aquarius, or when last time Saturn moved into Aquarius, or You think about the grunge, kind of grunge movement. Last time Saturn went through Capricorn and Aquarius back to back in the early 90s, a lot of what it was defined in terms of what it resisted, what it rejected, or what it was not. And that's a Saturnine type of thing. If you see Saturn in the 10th house, sometimes you'll see people who, of course, are going to be, they're just kind of like really straight-laced, disciplined, hardworking, traditional. You always have that side of Saturn. But a lot of what, again, would define straight-laced or traditional would be the ability to stick to one thing and reject anything else that comes in. I don't do that. I only stick to this one thing. So similarly, Saturn in the 10th house could be present in the charts of people who are, reformers, or who, for example, Timothy Leary, who was it Timothy Leary? I'm pretty sure it was Timothy Leary, who, was a proponent of, tune in and drop out, Saturn in the 10th house. So you have sometimes people who will be renegades, mavericks. Hunter S. Thompson had Saturn in his first house. So lots of, and the reason that I'm setting all of this up is because there's such a strong component of what you reject, or what you find unattractive or ugly, or what you say no to from an aesthetic or relational point of view when Saturn is opposite Venus, because you have the Saturn aspect. And the reason that the opposition is of the nature of Saturn is that we look in this ancient teaching chart that was called the Thema Mundi, and you can see that the signs opposite to the sun and the moon signs, Cancer and Leo, the signs opposite the moon and the sun, are going to be the signs of Saturn, Capricorn and Aquarius. And so the opposition was said to be of the nature of Saturn, the sign that ruled the signs opposite to the lights. So that's like the kind of schematic way of understanding what oppositions are like, or what they mean. So oppositions are like Saturn. So when you're taking the quintessential Saturnine aspect and you're putting Saturn in one end of an opposition, it tends to be really extreme, really strong in terms of the I am this but not that, or either over here or you're not, or the kind of theme of polarization. So then you're putting Venus on the other side, and Venus is, of course, the goddess of love, beauty, harmony, friendship, agreement, pleasant things. So when you put them together, what do you get? Well, you get the possibility for really strong feelings about what is beautiful and what is not. So what do I find beautiful or aesthetically pleasing, and what do I find ugly, or what do I wish to reject? If you think about that, that is the precursor for many people in terms of I'm going to get fit because I can't stand my body anymore, and I'm going to take up some kind of discipline. I'm going to get out of a relationship because I can't stand the behavior or lifestyle of the person I'm seeing. I am going to, change my wardrobe because I find everything in my wardrobe I have to reject now. It's totally ugly. So that just really potential strong feelings about what is valuable, what is beautiful, what is attractive, what is not, or what you feel you must reject in order to somehow redefine or reorient your sense of taste or value. Ugliness. A lot of people don't think about Venus in terms of ugliness. Of course, Liz Green famously talked about this, as did James Hillman, both of whom were students of Carl Jung. And not a lot of people, when they think of Aphrodite, do they think of a goddess who spends a lot of time around ugly things. But in fact, so much of what good taste requires is a strong ability to reject, or to select something and to reject other things. For example, if you've ever watched one of these fashion runway shows, and I've only seen some of these in passing, like, just curiosity, like, what is this? But you'll see maybe there's a designer or something, and they're showing their clothes, and there's a competition or something, or even like, what am I thinking of? The American Idol. The judges have a really refined taste, whether it's fashion or someone's singing voice or whatever the case might be. But they also have to have this very heightened sense of, oh, that's awful, and just like the disgust. Have you ever noticed that those things tend to accompany one another? If you're I know like my wife and I, when we were thinking about whether it was colors and some of the new walls in the house, or whether it was, some decor in some kid's room or something like that. It's so funny because you're shopping with each other and you're like, it's all fun and games until it comes time to make decisions about new house stuff. Oh my God, I can't believe you like that. It's like that, oh, and then you're like, oh, and then finally you come together. Yes. Okay. We both like this. But the process of refining something, making something beautiful, it almost always includes the feeling of needing to reject something. Now, a lot of the times, of course, Venus Saturn will show up when it comes to things like vanity, because if we're saying I want to be more beautiful, but I reject the way that I am. Sometimes, in the process, like, obviously over the years, I've had a lot of clients who have done like cosmetic surgeries or whatever. And they'll come back and they'll say, oh, I don't really, it's nice, but I feel like I like don't really look like myself. I'm not happy with the results. And of course, one of the great risks of such procedures is that, in trying to look better, you may lose something of what makes you look like yourself. Remember, Saturn was called the god of feigned appearances. And so the potential for us to reject something about our bodies or ourselves or of other people, if you can imagine, it can be very strong with Venus opposite Saturn. If you can imagine, for example, a family that, and I'm already seeing this as a parent in some of the, kids' events and programs and stuff like that. Some parents are so set on molding their kids to be perfect at something or really good at something. And they may be rejecting certain elements of what their child naturally is or looks like or is drawn to, because they're trying to mold or shape their child so strongly. And a lot of that comes down maybe unconsciously for the kid, as you're not good enough the way that you are, or your natural interests aren't, good enough or something like that. So it could be Venus, Saturn. If you think about justice and beauty, they actually have a lot in common. Remember that Venus rules Libra, Saturn is exalted in Libra. For us to have a strong experience of harmony, whether it's in our homes or families or work or just, greater community or something like that, we have to have a very strong sense of what we will tolerate and what we will not. And so what do we reject in terms of appropriate or inappropriate behavior? I'm like, for me, like, I've always been someone who's very open to hearing people's ideas all across the spectrum, because I've had people in my families, extended families, who have a pretty wide variety of beliefs and ideas and political inclinations and stuff like that. And thankfully, I grew up in an environment mostly where those differences were tolerated and you had to learn to kind of listen. But the thing that would always, I guess the way that I was brought up anyway, was that, there was an open-minded tolerance of ideas, but the way that you communicate your ideas, the way that you communicate what you think is important, the way that you communicate your convictions was like a line drawn in the sand. Like, if you started being condescending, rude, angry, belligerent, too aggressive, zealous, evangelical, like just like that, then it was like, nope, that's inappropriate behavior. So everyone was raised with some sense of what is appropriate or respectful, and because it could, in terms of the way that we communicate or express ourselves, and that there's a sense of fairness. Like, okay, you can express your ideas, they're different than mine or whatever, but then suddenly, your tone or the way you communicate it suddenly crosses some invisible line that, and all that invisible line probably looks different for all of us. But the point is that that line is not just a line. It's as hard a line to define as it is to define a style or taste for many people. And that's something that, I remember being in New York City, right? And I was a social worker in New York City. And I was in an office with three other social workers, and that line in terms of like what people were comfortable of talking about and how they were comfortable talking about it was very different for like, my um like one of the nurses was previously had been like a cop in, I want to say, like Brooklyn for like 30 years, and she was Irish, and she was just so tough, and hilarious too, really funny, but like she just rubbed people the wrong way sometimes, and and sometimes me too or whatever, but like her line was way different just because of the way she was raised and her background and things like that. So the point is, there was this really interesting book that I read one time called Aphrodite's Justice, and it was written by James Hillman, um, and the whole book was about the way that your aesthetic, what you find beautiful or attractive or funny or enjoyable or pleasing, it goes so closely hand in hand with what you think of as just or fair. And I think that's particularly true for Saturn and Venus dynamics. So when they come into opposition with one another, it's as though our sense of what is beautiful or acceptable or pleasing or pleasant and what is wrong or bad or crosses a line. So the kind of the concept of attractiveness and justice or fairness, or where is the boundary, with things that are pleasing or pleasant, that can hold true in sexual relationships as well. You know, um, every relationship, I mean, I talk to so many people, every day about their relationships. It's probably the most common thing that people talk to astrologers about, I would guess, are relationships. And one of the most common things that I hear people talking about is, the way that I need or appreciate love or affection or sex is different from the way my partner does. I find it so unattractive, or I find that, I don't feel safe, or whatever the case might be. People, that sense of what is beautiful, what is attractive, what is pleasing, and also where the boundaries are set in order to keep and maintain that kind of that experience, so that aesthetically pleasing vibration, and that, again, that's like part of Venus Saturn is recognizing, oh, this person does that very differently than I do, and can I find some compromise here, or are we at some kind of standstill? So values, boundaries, and the way that they show up in terms of what pleases or what doesn't, romantically, sexually, in terms of your workplace, things like that. There's also, I think, a fair amount of, like, in New Age sort of culture, there's this idea that seriousness, aging, death, disease, that these are only sometimes this is like an extreme, but like these are only the products of like negative thinking. If you bring these up, it means you're negative. If you are someone who prefers that these kinds of topics be sort of available and open parts of a conversation or an experience socially, that, oh, that's negative, or keep that low or bad vibration away from me. I saw this a lot being a yoga studio owner for a decade of my life. Different strokes for different folks. But Saturn and Venus are either, I like light and that's dark, so keep it away, or it's, I don't like fake. I need something that is both beautiful, but also has an edginess or a darkness to it. Get away from me if you're fake. And those extremes can come up really dramatically when Venus opposes Saturn. You have things like aging products. If you think about that, like whether it's pills or supplements or, whatever, just anything that might prolong life. You also have this idea of pride and exclusivity. This is beautiful. This is what I find attractive. And that is on the outside. So it can be very like clicky, like clicks socially, feeling like you're a part of something versus feeling rejected. The pride that you take in belonging to something versus feeling excluded from somewhere or someone or something. Jealousy and comparisons being made. I'm beautiful because everything else is ugly, or I'm ugly and I wish I was beautiful like that person, or just those kinds of hard lines between what is beautiful and what is rejected on the other side again. The potential for ego and ego woundedness, of course, if someone tells you you're not pleasant to be around, or there's something about you that I don't like, or you should be more like this, it can be very Saturn Venus. Loneliness. That's a big Saturn Venus dynamic. Venus Saturn can be um, essentially a sign of I want something in love, or I long for something beautiful, but I can't have it. I'm being separated from it or cut off from it. Unrequited love, things that aren't mutual. I really like someone, but they don't like me as much. Cliques in high school, fraternity and sorority things that go bad, like when these kids go to school and they try to join a fraternity and then they have some kind of hazing and then the kid gets killed, or like this can be very Venus Saturn. I want to belong, I want to be a part of the club or the group, but I'm rejected, or I'm somehow there's like a harming experience that happens. So those can be, you have to be very careful. It's not physical as much as like, I feel like, Mars, Saturn, Mars, Uranus is a bit more like that in terms of there being potential, you don't belong here, get out, you're not worthy. And then maybe physical altercations or harm that's done between insiders and outsiders. It tends to be a little bit more Marsy, but Venus can play along with this too. On the other hand, Venus Saturn is like a picture of something that ages well over time. The fine wine metaphor, deepening commitments, things that age well, things that get better with time, things that appear more beautiful over time. We've talked about this many times before in Venus Saturn videos where something is broken or rejected, but then you take the pieces and they meld it back together with gold. I always forget the name of what that is. I think it's from Japan. So form versus function, it's beautiful, but it doesn't do anything helpful, or it's beautiful, but it's sort of empty or hollow. And then again, like separation in relationships. This is maybe one of my favorite concepts to talk about. In Krishna Bhakti, we are philosophically, we're very aware of and okay with the fact that there is that there is separation or difference between the soul and God. For example, in the Bhakti metaphysics, that we use different kinds of like analogies and metaphors, like there's the sun, and then there's sunbeams, like there's light beams coming into my room right now, my office. Those light beams are not the actual ball of the sun, but they're connected to the sun. So they're both one with the sun and different from the sun simultaneously. So in Bhakti, we say that the relationships of variegated, infinite, variegated, unlimited relationships between different aspects of God, where, a soul like me or a soul like you is real and it has its own unique form and being and agency and freedom. But it's also a part of this greater oneness. And so I'm different and apart from that oneness, but I'm also connected to it at the exact same time. And that you need separation for there to be love and exchange. In the same way sexually, that, two people can become one, but they're always remaining individual at the same time through sexual union. So Venus Saturn is like the dimension or aspect of love that can be painful because it implies the separateness of things. But if we always just want to get rid of separateness in favor of oneness, we're missing out on something. It would be like, to use a sort of sexual analogy, it would be as though, a couple had no ability to make a sexual experience last a long time with foreplay, or if you only privilege the oneness, which we'll call the most undifferentiated state. It's just so powerful, it overwhelms, overcomes, and just sort of dissolves the boundaries, the ego, the body. So yes, that state is ecstatic, but if you've studied even just kind of from a distance, if you've heard anything about Tantra, the idea that peak experiences of intimacy and ecstasy can be sustained and prolonged when and can be done as two people feel that they are apart as they are also together. That these kinds of dichotomies are sometimes we're just too impatient for them. we're too impatient. We think, oh, duality is bad. It's oneness that I like. Well, but what does sacred duality look like? What does a duality look like where we understand that there's a dance between duality and oneness, duality and oneness? And that's one of the things that drew me to bhakti philosophically, was that bears out in my experience. That, for example, in the times that I'm away from my kids or my wife, I really deeply relish what they have, what they bring to my life and who they are, and how amazing it is to be so closely joined to them psychically and emotionally every day. And I can't have that until sometimes I have this experience of separation. That experience of separation is always, in other words, a part of what sanctifies our union or unity with other things. So we need both. The Tao Te Ching, of course, speaks about this very eloquently, the I Ching, things like that. So at any rate, the point is that Venus opposite Saturn on a kind of spiritual level reminds us that, the feelings of separation that we have, of loneliness or of rejection, these things are just an intimate part. They can't be separated from the experience of unity or of joy or of beauty or of bliss or of ecstasy. In a weird way, it's like reality itself is so beautiful that it's sort of terrifying and horrible. And at the same time, it's you if you look at it enough and experience, you keep experiencing things, everything keeps moving, and before you know it, it's not terrifying or painful, it's blissful. So I've always had a really deep appreciation. Maybe this is because I was born with Saturn in Libra, but I've always had some kind of weird ability to really appreciate how terrifying and overwhelming and vulnerable it is to be alive, and at the same time how really beautiful and amazing it is. So these two things are not like, we sometimes experience them as polar opposites, but the other way of experiencing oppositions in general is in terms of a kind of oftentimes these what appear as hard dichotomies, that you shall not pass, like I'm on this side and you're on that side, are swimming together, and they're secret lovers with one another, always. So at any rate, so those are my musings for the day. I hope that you guys are doing well. As always, now we got this new series rolling. So if you've got stories to share, #grabbed. Tell me how Venus Saturn is showing up in your life. Tomorrow we'll do Venus Uranus, or possibly on Thursday we'll do Venus Uranus as a part 2 for this week. But if you want to share a story, we're still in the process of getting an email address set up where people can send us their stories if they want to do it that way. But otherwise, just put #grabbed and tell us how the planets are showing up in your life, and what kinds of things you're learning from them, especially with this video for Venus Saturn like things that you're experiencing. All right, that's what I've got for today. I hope you guys are doing well, and we'll talk again soon. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.